Hey
Hey,
everybody,
folks,
we got it. Go ahead.
you got it. You're the host.
I know, but I was trying to clear this thing off. It's going to start echoing
Hey,
in a
folks,
minute.
glad all y'all could join us. Glad all y'all could join us tonight. I think Mike's playing with his new microphone settings and stuff.
No, it's actually the.
Um, the what?
I said I was muting the other channel so it don't come across on
Oh,
both of them.
all right. Um, Mike picked out a topic, which is a very interesting topic tonight. And hold on now, I gotta click mine off. I'm getting hearing us on the other thing.
That's what I was saying. I was trying to get mine clicked off. Hey Brandon. Hey Peopleson. Sue. Tim said, "Tell everybody hi. He'll be on later because of his work."
All right. And hey, all of y'all, Brandon, everybody else I done said hey to. But what the topic going to be tonight, what Mike already put in the invites about the 1800s. I actually don't know a whole lot about that. I mean, I've done some reenactments with Harmony Hall, and I really love that era, but I've never actually done research and studied it for facts and this and that and another. But I do plan on it, and Mike and I both plan on doing some 1800 style camping. But
I think it'll be interesting to actually go out there and try to break the myth about your mountain men because after studying it for a few weeks now and looking through it, a lot of the stuff that we have been Hollywoodified, I guess, is not what it actually was, and it's not as bad in some senses where some would think that it was this horrible life that they lived, and stuff of that. But um,
yeah,
kind of give it a few minutes, but just a few of the little topics, and I've kind of written them all down, just topics to kind of hit on. So you'll see me from time to time flip through this little journal thing that I've got here. But in a nutshell, I mean, it's not really. I'll kind of ask you a question, it's kind of get your input on it and see what you would think. So it'll kind of fall in. But on the average, what would you consider a mountain man, a trapper type style person? What would you think that would actually be something that they would carry on them pretty much at all times?
um, Mike, you need to make your video go to the side. We're only getting half of your face.
That shows me all the way
Um,
in it over here.
oh, well, mine, I'm only seeing half of you.
Was I sitting like this?
Yeah, now
Probably
all I
was.
see is your one eye. One thing I think that they would always carry on them would be a bedroll for sure. That would be my guess. And I don't know what else. I'd imagine a lot of the same stuff we would carry, I would think, such as fire starters, water container, something to cook in. But you said name one, and I've already named quite a few. So
No, I said
go ahead.
name
I ain't
name
looking.
name what one would have on him. But basically, a trapper's outfit consists basically of a rifle. Your woodsman, they would generally have some type of smoothbore rifle in the early 1800s and stuff of that nature. But the things that we always, or what I had, was thinking more along the lines of like we do, the 10 C's or something other, where the bare minimum that they would go out with. But it's kind of ironic to find out that most of them would take around a pound of powder with them for these excursions that they would go out with it, which would be a natural because they wouldn't have bullets like we would have. They would take up to, I think it was 4 pounds of lead would go with them. Then their little bullet or their bottle bullet molds, the little casting pliers that they would use for it.
Mhm.
Here's the interesting fact. On the average, because you don't do a lot of the steel trapping, but you do some of the other stuff, what would you think that, how many traps do you think would a mountain man take out with him to do his traps and stuff?
That it's kind of hard to figure on that because I would think back in those days the trapping meant a whole heck of a lot more. It was more dependent upon, than it is now. So I would think they would carry probably 20 traps at least.
Out of about 9
Probably.
people, and that's what I thought too. I was thinking because I have about 70 or 80 in the building, and
Yeah.
on a given time I can set anywhere between 10 to 30 if I have the time to go and check them and stuff. But
Yeah.
that's more because 80% of them are going to have nothing in them. But on the average, 6 to 7 traps is all they took.
Golly.
And the cool thing about it is a very good skilled trapper would generally have a beaver or something in every one of those. I mean, it wouldn't be something that they would go out and, have to go back like we do and recheck and reset, recheck and reset. They would have one in every one. And that's what kind of threw me off a good bit about it.
I hear you, Outdoor Ron.
What was it? I
He
didn't
got me
hear
on
it.
that. He said, "Where's my birdhouse, Alan?" The other day he got me on that, and he's joking around. I don't know on my birdhouse, but I didn't know. And he said, he commented and said, "Where's my birdhouse?" And I was thinking, "Oh crap, did I tell him I was going to sell my birdhouse?" My memory is so bad, and I was like, refresh my memory, and he put, "Just joking, man."
They would have it because when they would check their traps and stuff, first you got to skin it, then you got to flesh it, and then you got to get it hung and get it whatever you're going to do with it. So in a day's time, checking 6 or 7 traps with something in it, your day's pretty much filled up, and you wouldn't want to catch something for the coyotes or anything else out there to get it. But that generally they would carry a
Yeah.
camp kettle, a hatchet, a knife, and an awl, which is something
On
that
those traps, before we get off the subject of the traps, I wonder, was it different back then in the amount of animals available?
well, shoot,
Like
yeah,
when
it
we go out
was.
here and trap, so they probably had a crap load of more or a crap load of less
They would have a whole
animals
lot more.
available.
I mean, for
That's
you
what
to
I would
get
think.
7 beavers and a walking path, that you could
Yeah.
walk, that's
Uh,
pretty much unheard of for me in my area because I would have to drive to 7 different areas, to even get 7 in a week
yeah.
most of the time.
So
Um,
that may be some of the reason why they didn't have to carry so many traps is
exactly.
because the animals were a lot more available.
Right. And the time restraints too. I mean, if you set 30 traps, you wouldn't be able to get back to all 30. To set 30 of them for them would be an all day event, because it takes on average 15 to 20 minutes just to set a normal trap, and then you times that by 30 or 20, it would be an all day thing. And that's if you're good and expect to catch anything with it. But generally, they took 2 blankets between what they went by was points back then, but it's about 3.5 pounds weight is what it would average out to be. But one of
Yeah.
the things that I thought was funny, or not funny, but 7 pounds of flour, that was an average. Some would take 5 to 10, but they averaged it out to 7 out of all the journals that I read through. And most of them carried 2 to 3 horses and or a pack mule of some type, with them on that. But it was the
Well, what
camp
is the average of days that they'd be out there to have all that?
anywhere, and that's what I was going to get on to in there. Most of us think that it's a one solo trip. These were pretty much rendezvous in a sense, where they would be 25 to 30 trappers, mountain men that went out across from St. Louis, moving out and going out to wherever they're going. These are not something where Jeremiah Johnson, where he's out in the middle of the woods that Hollywood has made it, where he's soloing by himself. Now, there were
Yeah.
instances where those would happen, where after closer to the 1860s is when more of that started falling into where, we've done made it across and everything's happened and then the lands are starting to be filled up. They want to get up to the mountains and get away from it. Um, uh, the Lewis and Clark thing on there, on the average, how many calories a day on that expedition do you think an average man would eat in calories?
That I would not have a clue of because I don't know nothing about keeping up with calories.
Lewis wrote in his journals that it's upwards of, and I forgot the word that he used on it, but they broke that down into modern day 6,000 calories a day. That's
Oh,
equivalent
really?
to about 8 times the amount that you eat, and probably about 6 times the amount that I would eat in a day. 6,000 calories.
Dang.
Um, some of the other kind of 6,000 calorie days a day, which of most of it was just pure protein. I mean, because they didn't
Yeah.
have the abundance of all the other stuff. They're most of them would eat deer, elk, buffalo, antelope, bighorn sheep, and stuff of that nature there. Um, but dairy products is not something that they would be able to get a hold of, frequently when they would go out to the forts and stuff. Would be something that they would actually go out, and if they were lucky enough, they could actually get some type of dairy products by trading in furs and things of that. Um, some of the things that at times whenever food has gotten scarce and they'd went out, um, I've heard of it and I never thought it was to be true and stuff, but moccasins, you see it in the movies where they've eaten moccasins and boiled them and stuff like that. According to
Yeah.
these journals here, out of Branzer, I think was his name, and his journals, they had eaten both pairs of moccasins as a meal just to
Huh.
supplement calories because they hadn't eaten in days. You know,
Dang.
soup of moccasin soup. I mean, I'm sure it had a funk taste to it, but um, some of the other myths, whenever you describe a mountain man and his face, what would you describe him being?
I know, I know what you're getting at, but I know my original thought would have been, or would be, long scraggly hair, long scraggly beard. Just I would say somebody that would be your average picture of a hobo.
Yeah. In theory, Hollywood made that up pretty much with a lot of it. By the late 1860s, then a lot of them did start wearing beards, but by then hygiene was a little bit better off. But lice was one of the biggest factors, even in the civilian cities. Lice was huge in the early 1800s to about 1845, 1850. So most of them kept a clean shaved face because one,
Huh.
it was just less hair that they had to fool with, to get lice and other things of that nature. When I was flipping through one of the journals, like on the books and stuff, then it had a list down there. Those little knit combs that you get with a writ or whatever they have, on an average, whenever the big person taking and sending out for doing over the rendezvous of going out would get over 400 of those combs. That was what was
Golly.
averaged out because of the lice being so bad that was in there.
Huh.
The other thing is with a straight razor, once you've gotten like this right here, you can forget it with a straight razor. It's not going to happen. Your face is going to be
Hey,
tore all to
Woodsman.
pieces. Um, but they would keep a clean shaven face, and a lot of times they would trade with Indians, and with an Indian, very few would have any type of facial hair at all. And it was pretty much they considered you to be barbaric if you were coming into their tribe with all this big old long facial hairs and stuff that would be on there. And a lot of the men would be trying to, trade furs for a wife or something of that nature as later on in time. And with those women, they weren't too keen of that, so none of them would be like stepping up to like, oh, I'll take this guy. But it kind of brought back to when we were talking about Jeremiah Johnson earlier. If you'll remember in the movie, one of the things where she was broke out and then she shaved him, or had him shave. But that was
Yeah.
pretty much one of the things that was kind of came into it. But it wasn't until the late around mid 1850 that beards were even something that people would wear, on a daily basis, especially out there in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Indians actually called them dog face if they had a beard, was what several of them had put in there.
I wonder why the Indians couldn't grow beards and mustaches.
That I don't know. That's a genetic part, I guess. I don't know.
Mike or Alan, have you ever seen the magazine The Backwoodsman?
I get
Yes,
it
I
every
have.
I get it every month. Well, actually every 2 months because it comes out every 2 months. I've got a stack that's like I've had it for about 8 years now.
I don't have a prescription like Mike does, but when I was in Harmony Hall, the reenactment crew I was in was called Backwoods Militia, and that's where I saw the magazine. They had it.
One of the other things that I found interesting was shelters. Most of the time when
face white man.
Do what? Oh,
dog face white man.
That's pretty much where they would come up with it. I was always under the impression that, you know, the lean-to was one of their most common shelters, you know, that would be used by the woodsmen and stuff of that nature. But very, very few out of it's a compilation of about 200 journals that are written from this time all the way up, and it's just kind of, you have to dig through all of it, and then it'll give you references that you can go look up and stuff. But canvas A-frame shelter, sort of 6x8, just a normal tent, 6 foot wide by 8 foot long, was pretty much the only thing that one of them would even consider having. And most times during the earlier, you know, the dead winter, we think of them going out and, you know, having this little cabin, or I did, you know, a cabin in the woods or a nice lean-to shelter, you know, with wood and this big fires and stuff. Most of them would hoard up during the winter time because the lakes were already frozen and the rivers are frozen. So there's not much trapping that's going to be going on for anything of that nature. But I was always thought, well, maybe they'd make debris shelters, do things of that nature. And one of them, well, in a nutshell, canvas was fairly expensive. So a few of them, just very few, actually had any canvas type tents or anything like that. Most of them, the one count was these two men in their journal, they had wrote that it had rained so bad and so soggy everywhere that they went that they finally found a semi-dry spot and took 2 of their buffalo robes and laid them down and then covered up with those. And it said within a few hours, the movement had done sunk in that to where you would eventually try to keep moving as much as possible, because every time you moved, more water, cold water, would come in. So a lot of the times, most of them would actually just take and cover up with their buffalo blankets or wool. You know, not wool wasn't one of the more useful things, but the buffalo hides and things like that. That's what they did. They just laid on the ground and they would speak of the stars, looking at them and stuff, find a rock, you know, that was fairly well, lay down, put a pillow into it of some type. And that was their sleeping arrangements. It wasn't, you know, it's kind of like the old cowboys, you know, where they'd go out across the range and pop a saddle down and go to sleep right under the stars, as opposed to what I'd always thought more of, you know, the nice lean-to shelter with, you know, sides on it and, you know, bust out a few logs and things like that. But none of that was one of the things.
That's cool, Brendan.
What was
That's cool, Brendan. He's thinking about keeping a journal, and Luke says he's thinking about it too. I have just recently started keeping a journal too, y'all, and it's pretty cool. Hard to keep up with at first, hard to do it every day, but you don't have to do it every day. But I was thinking while you were talking about all that, Mike, do you remember, or did you ever read or search the Mad River Trapper?
You
I wonder what time period he was in.
I'd have to look at it. I could probably find it if it's in the 18.
Yeah, I read it before. I just don't remember the time period, but I don't think it was the 1800s, because I remember the news people that was reporting it there were airplanes available in that time period. So yeah, I don't think it was the 1800s.
That would have to be.
But I remember on his, you know, on his story, he was someone who didn't talk hardly any words and went out there just to trap on his own and ended up shooting the people that were looking for him or coming messing with him and stuff. But when they finally shot him, the actual picture showed that he was in something like a lean-to when they shot him. I mean, the story goes, like if you watch the Death Hunt with Charles Bronson, that story shows them blowing him up in a little cabin he made. Mm-hmm. But if you read the the real tale of it, the real stories of it, they got actual pictures of. It's like a lean-to debris shelter where they shot them in it.
I don't know if I've ever seen that one or not. I remember something about that. I think it may have been something you had asked me about one time before.
Yeah. You can look it up on YouTube. They got a whole documentary of them, but it's a pretty awesome story, really.
I found something interesting in this. You know what a lucifer is?
I know who Lucifer is.
Well, you're on the right track.
What is it? It can't be nothing good.
It's a match. That's what they were called, a match, instant fire. It was more of a novelty. It wasn't something that they did. Flint and steel was one of their most important pieces in their possible bag. On the average, those things sold for 3 cents a piece. In any fort that they went into, they would basically get anywhere between 10 to 12 of them to keep with them, throughout the 5 months, because after a period of time, they start wearing. Not nothing major. I mean, one will last you, but if you're making 2 to 3 fires a day, with it, or using it for other things that they had speak of in there. But what would be one of the most prized possessions that you would think a mountain man would have?
Most prized possession.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in my way of thinking, I'm going to say a knife.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I read in there. I finally got tired of reading. I read 6 of them. 6 different people have went and tracked back over 12 miles looking for a knife that they had lost. These journals where they had went back because it was just something that it was their most prized possession, was that knife, because and it kind of brings it back to us today, how you can take a knife and pretty much start from scratch and get everything you need with that cutting tool. Eventually you got to work at it, you got to get going, but take that knife out of the factory and give you a boiling pot, you're still in a problem. Take that knife out and give you a tent shelter, you're still in that problem. But if you got that knife, you can get something to boil with that knife. You have to make it out of whatever you can. I mean, there's so many things. So it's not dragging it out or anything, but that was one of their most prized possessions.
Well, me, that's what I always figure anyways. I always say you can drop me off in the woods anywhere in the world with nothing but a knife and I'll survive. Sue said that Sue said a lock of his wife's hair.
No, they didn't. Most of them weren't married. Most of them were young, and a lot of them were Irish, which I found ironic. A lot of, we hear of people like Jim Bridger and other names like that, which brings it up to an interesting part that a young Irishman that was in one of Jim Bridger's camps had wrote in his journal that his biggest fear, but yet his biggest accomplishment, was telling Mr. Jim Bridger himself when he came by and checked his gun, because they had camp checks because of the Indian and stuff, and you would have a camp boss that would come around and make sure that your weapons were accessible, ready to go, and good and clean. And Jim Bridger apparently had gotten attacked by some Indians at one time, and they had took in his rifle, and he fled. He took off running down a trail, just left the scene, which is unheard of in a lot of the Hollywood books and stuff, because he would have just went in there and stabbed them all with a toothpick until they all died. But it was noted in his journal too that he had done that. Well, that young man was standing there, and the little Irishman, I forgot what his name was, but he said that he had told him, he came by and he looked at his weapon, and it was not in very good order at all. And he says, "What would you do with this weapon in the condition that it is in?" He said, "Well, sir," he said, "I'd probably throw it at him and run down the train trail you were on." So, needless to say, he said Mr. Bridger never came and checked his weapon again because he knew that what had happened, he had him quick-witted, I guess. But I'm a big fan of the Collins axe, and it's kind of funny when I stumbled across it. The Collins axe started in 1826. The manufacturing company in Connecticut, Canton, Connecticut, I think is where it was from. But on the average, a good felling axe from Collins I forgot what pound it was. I think it was 4 or 5 pound felling axe that they had on there. You know what the average cost for that axe would be? Then new,
Back in that day,
yeah,
I don't know what, but $2.
no, not even close.
What?
36 cents to 60 cents, depending on where it was
Oh,
at. But if you bought it in the city and then took it to one of these rendezvous places, upwards of 1,000 times that amount.
golly.
That's how much they would give for something of that nature for one of those axes, because it was very hard to obtain. I guess not many people traveled around through it.
That's about the way I feel, Ron. Ron had asked a question earlier about what does everybody think about this 10-pound pack thing that's going around YouTube. I haven't really watched any of the videos of it yet. 10-pound or 10 item was it? I forget what they said.
It's a 5 pound 10 item or something other. I think it's something of that. I've seen several of them. I honestly, at this point, I've kind of in the last month or so, I have gotten away from. I don't know what word it would be. Keeping up with the trend. I guess kind of getting
Yeah.
back more to what I started out with, which is pretty much
Jones.
Yeah, it's just keeping up with everything. I mean, you've seen the wall behind me. I added them up for Donnie the other day, and I have 15 backpacks. Why?
Yeah.
I mean, it's because it's the newest thing, and I have 5 different cook sets, and then it's gotten to the point to where I'm more interested in less is more, but being able to do more, using different items for more than one or two uses. But
I finally got to use my new cook set on this last trip. That's the first time I ever used that new cook set and the Stanley Cup, which I think I've used the Stanley Cup here at home before, but that's my first time, I think, actually using it in the bush. I'm not sure. But I like the Stanley Cup a whole heck of a lot. Plus, I like that new cook kit. It was the one I did. All I did was cook bannock in that new cook kit. Matter of fact, I need to wash it still. But it sucks when you get a new cook kit. It's so pretty, shiny, silver, copper bottoms, and then all of a sudden it's black, and you're like, oh man.
But you know what?
It ain't pretty no more.
I remember I had talked with Karen one night, Shocky, and she had told me how to keep that from happening. So I started doing that. Yeah, but then I got to thinking, I like that look now. Because there's nothing worse than, this is the cook kit I've had for 12 years, and you pull it out and it's shiny. They're like, yeah, you ain't done nothing with that thing.
I haven't washed this one yet, so I don't know how easy that stuff's going to come off. It's got that copper bottom, though, so I don't know if that's going to come off easy. I didn't set it in the fire. I set it on coals to make that bread with, and plus I don't know if anybody's ever done that. It's kind of like turning your little pot into an oven. I set it on the coals to have the bannock in it, and then laid a log that was already burning in the coals on top of it to kind of give it the oven kind of setting. What'd you get? What are you laughing at?
Donnie said, I only need one cook set if I'd learn how to quit burning them biscuits.
Biscuits.
I don't burn biscuits. I char biscuits. There's a difference. I have multiple purposes. You can eat them, maybe, but you can use them for fire starter. Burnt biscuit. I quit. I'm out of here. That's the first time I think I've ever cooked them with that little gas thing. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Donnie kept reaching over, turning the oven up.
I want to talk about the 1800s and cooking. Tell what you and I were talking about the other day. Oh no, that wasn't us talking. That was me watching a video. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the cooking though, where I don't remember if you mentioned it or if it's a video you sent me or what, but I think it's a video I just watched. But anyways, it's about cooking, how they cooked in the older days on the campfire, where you put two logs in a V shape.
That's Brian Knapp.
Yeah, and
The
then put the
hobo
fire
fire.
down here, and then the hobo fire, and then just
Yeah.
scrape your. Yeah.
He actually done a very good video on that, and there's a lot of interesting facts about it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched. That's the video I watched, was him doing it, Brian Knapp. Yeah.
He has.
Did you send me that, or did I just watch it anyway?
I think I shared it on my Facebook, and you may have seen it on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of foods, what would most foods and stuff, we know they were preserved by salting or smoking of stuff like that.
Yeah.
What would be some examples that you would think that they would carry with them?
I would figure buffalo, deer. I'm not sure how the question is going. What type of food, or how the
what kind of foods would they would take with them when they would leave out? You got part of it right.
I would think when they would leave out, they'd have some old cured buffalo meat, or cured deer meat, or cured bear meat, or just whatever they had. And then the flour, of course, like you said, they carry 7 pounds of flour. So I don't imagine they had any cans of green beans or nothing.
Most of the time it was like bacon, salt pork, smoked ham, dried, or corned beef. And like you had said, whatever game animal that they could, obtain while they were out on the trail. Dried fish was also a big part of their diet. They would get those, before they went far in, and try to go ahead and get them. Actually, Brendan's pretty much right on it.
Survival. Johnny bread mix.
Yeah. Breads include biscuits, flapjacks, bannock or fry bread, cornbread, and of course that dreaded hardtack. You've had that before. I don't even.
What is it?
Hardtack.
What is hardtack?
You ain't never had it. You go look it up on YouTube and you make it, and then you come back and smile at us. That's like brick tack's what it should be called. I mean, you can moisten it back up, but it's not. But most of their foods were pretty much monotonous. They ate the same food for months on end. I mean, occasionally your favorite, they'd have rice. If they could get it and obtain it, they'd get rice and things like that. But beans, hominy. I mean, it's pretty much like sitting down and picking your favorite meal that you don't get but once a month and eating it every day. You're just like, oh, chicken and dressing.
You can't go
old.
You can't go wrong with rice, though, y'all. I hadn't uploaded the part of this video yet where I ate rice on this trip everybody's watching now.
Mm-hmm.
Where I went camping in the swamp. I hadn't got to the cooking part yet, I don't think. But I cooked some rice, and I always carry rice with me. And the reason I carry rice with me is because, for one, you can eat rice by itself and add some salt to it, and it's good, salt and pepper, and it's good. It's easy to cook, and anything goes with it. So, I mean, as far as on the rice subject, you can't go wrong with rice. It's always, every time I go out, I got rice with me.
I'm not a big rice person. Brown rice with ham, but that's about it.
You can fry the rice too. I have never done that, but Karen Shockey mentioned that to me one time about frying it.
There was a website that I had found, like with one of the bigger things in the camp and stuff with it's kind of odd because when I speak of camp, it's not like 5 or 6 guys. You're talking about, several guys that they were just, that camp was on the move at all times, leaving out of St. Louis and working their way across, and, they would stop in at certain forts that were on there, and then they'd pick up more supplies of whatever they needed and sell their furs, trade them, or do whatever, and then whatever other guys that they would come into. But it was just everything that I kind of thought the mountain man was is accurate, but not 100% accurate. I mean, most of them were younger men. Some of them didn't make it, whether attacked by grizzlies or, just died from the weathers in itself. But a lot of them, like I'd mentioned before, they were Irish descent, you know, making their ways around, and that was something that I really didn't, consider that much whenever I was looking into it. Um,
What is, before I forget, what is your favorite part of that Jeremiah Johnson show?
Probably
Name one part that was your favorite.
when he was building the house, the log cabin.
My favorite part is because you just mentioned grizzly. Is when when that old man said, "Are you sure you can skin a grizzly?" Anyway, got him to come running. The old man's just laughing his butt off while that grizzly's chasing him, and he runs in that cabin and jumps out the window. After I done went back to that and watched it several times. Just he says, "Skin that one, Pilgrim, and I'll get you another one."
I'll get you another one. A lot of the stories that were put into books were just that. They were tall tales. They were just stories,
Yeah.
and because that was one of the big things the guys would, it's like with us guys, we get around the campfire, and even with women, I'm sure they probably do it as well. But as long as you stretch the truth with no harm, they was okay with that because they wanted to hear a good story. They didn't want to hear that, 50 yards out, I popped a grizzly bear with my Hawkins. He fell over dead. They want to hear you got up 2 feet from him. You snuck in behind him, stabbed him with a knife, and you had this big battle, and you brought this, 20-second story into a 15-minute, and that's how a lot of it would pop into it. The stories that we hear were just that. They were stories. They weren't the actual truth, behind a lot of
Tim.
it.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody that's just came in. I hadn't got to read much on that.
It's amazing just how bad that Hollywood and the stories does make stuff. I mean, it's cool. It's entertaining, and that's what Hollywood is an entertainment company. So they're going to make something to where it is entertaining, and that's exactly what they've done. But to research the truth compared to what Hollywood is, where are people most likely going to learn from? They're not going to learn from the truth. They're going to learn from the movies they watched, like Kids Coming Up and so forth. And
right.
I mean, to being honest, I never knew that folks shaved back then. I figured they'd all be big old hairy gorilla looking fellows. I didn't think.
And me, it's the same. That's what I thought.
Because that's what Hollywood portrayed it as, watching it growing up on every outdoor movie you've ever watched, like Jeremiah Johnson.
Well, I mean, if I told you The Last Mountain Man and it was an Irish man, playing it, that's not what we grew up knowing. We'd be like, well, this is not Jeremiah Johnson. I'm not going to go watch this, but in theory, it would probably be as close to real, if that was, the part of it.
Brandon, however you pronounce your name, that's exactly right, man.
What was it?
If you're hungry, he says, I think if you're hungry enough, you'll be eating anything you can get your hands on.
Definitely.
And they're talking about cream corn from a can and rice and that stuff, but other than that, I've been hungry plenty of times in my life, and I've gotten to the point now to where my taste buds aren't even taste buds no more, really. I mean, I like a good taste in something, but to me, McDonald's is my favorite restaurant to eat at, and that makes a lot of people sick, like my family. They're like, ooh, you eat at McDonald's? I'm like, well, yeah, there ain't no better restaurant around, but all the times I've been starving in my life, from times of running away as a kid, living in the woods for 2 or 3 weeks at a time without eating nothing hardly at all, you just learn to where there ain't no such thing as, ooh, I don't like that. I can't even think of a food that I want to eat, and I'll try anything. Even
Don't try one of my biscuits.
I've tried possum before and I didn't like that, but if I was hungry, I'd damn sure eat it again. You know, and I tried beaver tail and I didn't like that, and I can't say that I would eat that again. That's just pure nasty. but yeah, if you're hungry, your taste buds will freaking give you a more leverage as to what you can eat if you're really starving.
But what are they talking about Costco?
I don't know.
You know, that was a lot of the things too that, I mean, and I've only touched out of the 7 books, I've only touched a tenth of it, you know, and to read more of it and find out more stuff because there's so much more stuff on there. I mean, it's like um, the tassels and stuff on the little frenzies that come down on buckskin and stuff. Um, you know what the purpose of those were?
I used to know.
I
Um, to make it quieter, or I don't know. Tell me. I used to know. I forget now.
according to this here, that the Indians said that it was to break up the silhouette because when they were out hunting,
Yeah, that was it.
the tassels on it didn't portray that image because if they were turned and if you're like this, you're blocked. I mean, every one of us have a rectangle shape, you know, to
Yeah,
draw you out. You start out with rectangles and stuff or centers and stuff. So it gives you that, it breaks it up. One of the guys had written in there that he had heard that it was for rain, you know, it would help wick the rain off. And
yeah,
the journal thing that was in there, and he said he had heard that many a time. He says, but wet is wet. You know, if the buckskin is wet, it's not very comfortable to
yeah.
wear.
Um, Brennan wants to know what books you were talking about.
These are all journals. It's out of the, get back up here because I've got it on here. Mountain Men and the Life in the West, but they're all. I bought the 7 books. They're PDF format books, I guess what you call it, instead of getting the actual book sent to me. So I just flip through them, and it's actually a lot easier for me.
I bet Tim would eat anything. Tim's gonna be about like me as far as when you get hungry, you'll eat anything. You was talking about the things hanging on the sleeves. That's also similar to why there's a feather or something hanging on a spear.
Yeah,
That was
that's a
to
wind direction.
go ahead. Oh, I
I
wasn't
do.
gonna say that direction. I
Well,
thought it was for when they're stabbing at something. It seems like I've read this somewhere before, and I could be wrong, but where when they're stabbing, like say a bear, the every time they move the spear, the feather throws them off. So, like if the bear strikes, the bear might strike at the feather instead of the spear to knock it out of the hand.
that may be true too. I didn't know. I mean, I've not heard that one. I know that with my bow, if you ever see me, if I ever get out there in the woods again, I keep 2 feathers on my bow, and it's for wind direction because if you raise it up, they're under feathers. If you raise the bow up, that feather will tell you because it's so light, it'll tell you
Huh,
which way the wind's blowing.
that's pretty cool. I never knew that.
There was a young man, Drew. I don't know his last name. Donnie knows him real well. He's the one that done the shirts. He made a very good Osage orange bow, and he done very well on it. He did back it with rawhide. Um, Nothing wrong with it though. I mean, but it was a very well built bow, and I want to say he that was either his second or his first bow that he's ever done. I can't remember one of the two.
Hmm.
That was some of the other stuff that they talked about with the buffalo um, hunters and stuff. These guys would take their rifles and at a full gallop reload these muzzle loaders with the powder at full gallop, and because they couldn't stop, And most deaths that occurred during that time was falling off of the horse. Yeah, Drew Roberts, that's the gentleman's name. He's a nice young man, and he at first you wouldn't think that he was. He spun out a spindle fire in 4 to 5 minutes, I guess, from start to finish. Just
bow drill?
no spindle.
Oh, hand drill.
Just slung it out. There was something else that I was going to tell you that I couldn't remember. That Collins axe. One of the 1826 Collins axe. They have it at a museum and stuff, but the museum actually purchased it, I guess, or purchased that particular one. It looked immaculate on the picture that it showed in there, but the price sale tag that they purchased it for was like $6,000. So it just goes to show you, and the fire steels generally would average 3 cents per fire steel to make, or not make, but actually they would sell them for it.
On that food subject, eating whatever you can, it'd be hard for me to even think of what's the grossest thing I ever ate, because I done ate so much gross stuff. But I remember when I lived on the streets, I can still remember the very first time I ate out of a trash can. It was a dumpster behind a restaurant because they threw away a lot of good stuff. And at first I thought it was gross, but I was so hungry. And after I ate it, it was like there wasn't a daggum thing wrong with eating it. I didn't feel gross after I ate it. But I remember eating lots of gross stuff like that. I mean, there's times, I remember one time living on the street where I walked up to a payphone just because I seen a McDonald's bag sitting there. It was back when they had payphones everywhere. There's a McDonald's bag sitting on the payphone, and I walked up there. I lived on the street, so it wasn't nothing for me to be a scavenger anyways. But I walked up there like I was making a phone call, and I'm looking around and making sure ain't nobody looking, and I grabbed that McDonald's bag and pull it down. There's a half a hamburger in it and some cold French fries, and it filled me up, and it was good. And I'm sure everybody who's watched my 5-day survival challenge watched me eat a hat full of worms.
They're not that bad.
I don't know. They're pretty daggone bad.
It just tastes, once you get past the dirt. But they say
it's like the worm itself is kind of okay, but once you crunch into one of them hard parts of it, like the little bulging out part, that's just something nasty. I don't know what it is, but I don't like to swallow them because I'm afraid they'll crawl around in my belly, so I chew them. And I'm chewing them. You can feel it when you crunch into that little hard part, and it's like it's just a real nasty, turn your mouth inside out type of taste to that little hard part.
The midday meal, like lunch and stuff, wasn't introduced as part of a normal everyday life until about 1874.
Yeah.
Most people ate a hearty breakfast and then a big meal at night. And one of the reasons for the larger meals to be eaten at night was the body would heat up and help keep them warm. Burn it off, the body would not really raise its temperatures, but it would be more functional as opposed to just laying there in a small coma.
Yeah.
It did say that canned vegetables and canned meats weren't really available to the mountain men, but around 1813 was when they started doing a lot of the canned meats and vegetables.
That's a cool way, Tim. This is off of the 1800 subject, but it's back in the later days in the earlier 1900s. Me and Mike was on the phone talking today about this, and I'd come across a website I was reading about how people camped in the earlier 1900s, And come to find out how one of the main ways they would cook food is on their car motor. And I already knew that to an extent. I mean, I'd heard something about it somewhere in my life before, but reading about it was a lot more interesting, because they even said that they sold this thing that was shaped like a mailbox that you hook up to your manifold in your Ford Model T or whatever it was. And they had recipes. Like, say you was wanting to do a roast, the recipe would tell you how far to drive to cook your roast and how many times to stop and check it. And some pretty wild stuff back then. So you're actually cooking a roast while you're driving.
Well, I mean, they wasn't like we talked about. They wasn't a McDonald's on every other exit, So
Yeah.
they had to get it going. Um, when did about the belt and stuff that we commonly use now in belt loops and stuff?
Yeah.
They most of the people, the belt and belt loops wasn't introduced till about 1851, 1852. Prior to that, the belt was used to carry your utilities, like what we were talking about. I was wanting to start making and stuff. That's what the belt
Yeah.
was designed for. It didn't have all the little extra loops and this, and that and stuff. It was pretty much taken back to the 15, 16, 1700s, the belts and stuff. Your trousers were made to fit around the waist and had suspenders with buttons, would be one way of
Yeah.
holding them up. But I thought that was cool after reading that and then thinking about, because that's one of my biggest drawbacks for a utility belt, sort of like with all the pouches that I've made and the ones that I'm making. I'm like, well, I didn't. This is a waste because I got a belt loop here, I got one back here and one over here, and I can't twist this thing around. And then when I seen Chris just have his on with a regular belt under it, but then he just spun it around. I mean, it was like a lazy Susan, just get whatever you
Yeah.
wanted off of it and put it back.
I use my I guess you call it the fanny pack. I use that kind of for an extra belt like that. I hook everything
Right.
onto the fanny pack when I wear it.
And then just slide it around when you need it.
Yeah.
They did. Long hair was pretty much an acceptable mountain man. I mean, their hair would grow long. Um, it's just their face wasn't as much. Oh,
Brandon, if you try the crickets and grasshoppers, I've ate them raw before, but that was before I knew that that's not good to do. When I ate them
they're
raw,
nuts.
I didn't get sick or nothing, but you very easily could get sick because they're full of parasites and stuff, or could be full of parasites.
Kids today don't know what a belt is. My son does, but he don't know all the functions of it. He thinks it's just to hold his pants up. Now, if I was to tell him, I said, go get my belt, he'd be like, where are we going? But I mean, we're getting close to the 11 o'clock and I'm going to have to get out of here. But I mean, the more I read on this here, I mean, there's other interesting facts. Um, the book thing is Mountain Men and Life in the Rocky Mountains. Um, True myths and disbeliefs and wild tales and lies. Um, but I mean, some of the subject guides in it are the mountain men, the women, the equipment, clothing, shelter, transportation, food and drink, mountain medicine, entertainment, glossary, skins and furs, rendezvous, trade goods, and forts, post, wild tales and lies, links, myths, and everyday life. Reenactment, if for those that were into it. I stumbled across it a few weeks ago, and I just went ahead and I mean, you get the PDF format thing on it. It wasn't but like $21, I think. But if you bought the book straight from Amazon, all of them together total like $58.
You see Luke's comment?
Mm. I'm 12 and I'm putting one on now. No kidding.
That's why we have to watch our language.
I know all about the belt and the switch and the flip flop and the shoe and whatever else was handy.
A hairbrush, an
Yeah.
iron cord. I've been whooped with a hairbrush, a wire hairbrush, more times than I can imagine.
You're the only guy I know that's had a foot paddling.
Yeah, I didn't ever know of them either until I had one. I thought that was like against the law.
Yeah.
Have your feet beat. It's so funny too. Back in the days where I was in. Those of y'all who don't know, I was in a Christian home that would beat your feet with a stick for punishment. But it's so funny because back then it wasn't just come here, you're getting a foot whooping. Your foot whooping was a time limit, and the time limit was by whatever you did wrong. However bad of wrong you did was what the time limit of your foot whooping was going to be. You get a minute foot whooping, a 3-minute foot whooping. That don't sound like much, but when somebody's beating on the bottom of your foot constantly with that stick, after about 35 seconds, you'll start screaming like the rest of them.
we ain't in the 1800s, but these last 15 comments, we bring it back to 60s and 70s real quick.
I got a snake coming out of my head. Oh, I took a video today of a snake, Mike. I might send it to you. It's on my phone. I hadn't done nothing with it. When I went over to the other house today, I pulled up on my scooter on the side of the house where my Egyptian walking onions are. And there's a big old black snake just curled up. And I pulled right up to him with the scooter. And he just sat there. I was thinking maybe he's too cold to move. And I started filming him while I was sitting on my scooter. I turned the scooter off, put kickstand down. I said, let's see how fast he can move. And I got off and started walking towards him. And he was gone just like that. But dang, he let me pull. The tire was almost touching him on the scooter, and he didn't move. He didn't move until I got off of it and walked.
But there's a couple of places that you can get to a website that has a lot of the same stuff on that, and it's cool to sit and actually see it, but it gives me more ideas of being more accurate when I do some of the videos that I want to do, of being more accurate to what it really was as opposed to what I think it was or what I've been taught that it was. And that's a hard life. I mean, even though it's, we kind of knew that it was, but, to go out there and actually, now we would go out and would, after working all the years that we've worked and stuff, we would like, yes, man, I'd love to go out for 5 months. But, in reality is after a month of it, how many of us would say, okay, I'm ready to go back to 50 hours a week at the work, and I know I say right now to this day, oh man, I've missed my calling by 150 years. That's the time and era that I'd want to go in. But it's not the being able to survive part of it. It's all of the lice, the sickness. You don't have the medicines, that you have now. We get a headache now, we can take some. You have to know where that medicine's at out there. If the scurvy and all this other stuff, which is a little bit further past in time, but just all of the bad things starts weighing in on what we want to do, so we have it fortunate and disfortunate as well to be able to, okay, I'm packing up and going home, and I got a 5-mile track, but you get out 600-700 miles away from where you came from, it may be another 100 miles before you get to another civilization. You're there now. It's real.
I wonder too, though, as far as it being hard times, which I'm sure it was hard times, no doubt, but being hard times in the matter of a sense that we're looking at it, they didn't have all the stuff that we have today to worry about. They had
definitely
different worries, but life was a lot simpler. It was a hard life, but a much more simpler life to what I think. Because I mean, now we've got hundreds of problems now to worry about, stress wise, job wise, family wise. just everything in today's time that we worry about was unheard of back then,
and
most of it. So
I kind of put that in perspective. It's like there, all right, I got to go out and find my family food. I've got to plant my family's food. You know, I plant a garden out here and say I'm going to save $800 this year, so we're going to put $800 towards vacation because I'm going to plant a garden, I'm going to work it, and I'm going to do everything. All of a sudden, the rain comes in for 10 days straight, blows it, tears it completely up. Sun comes out, doesn't get another lick of rain, doesn't get anything. My family's not going to do without food. So then all of a sudden, this is the new stress back then is the crops are gone. What are we going to do? Where now it's like, man, the crops are gone. I guess I'm going to put in an extra 5 hours a week and go to the grocery store and get it. So, I mean, it has its allure, but it also has its same effects that we have today, just a different stress, where ours is worried about getting to work, getting the bills paid. Theirs was worried about providing on a daily basis.
And they didn't have credit card stuff to worry about, all the different types of debts. You notice too, if you notice that all of those, well, I'm sorry, but my dog's under my desk and I just kicked it in the face. All the pictures you see from back in that time period, all the pictures you see from back in those time periods, you never see anybody smiling. You ever notice that? Out of all the black and white pictures you see, when do you see somebody actually smiling or laughing?
Well, I mean, it was, it's funny you say that because I read something and you jogged my memory, but it ain't good enough. It was, what was it that I read on it? It wasn't customary for anybody to smile. It was like you wanted a serious look to, your normal everyday or whatever, but there was something about that. And I probably shouldn't have said that because now I can't remember it. And I just got everybody thinking maybe somebody here can say it, but it was very common up until around the 1930s and 40s before people would smile in a picture or anything like that. Maybe it's Hollywood put it in there, make them think you're happy. As opposed to like, all right, let's get this picture out of the way because I got a hog to kill.
It's so cool though when you look at a picture like that. Like you look at a family portrait, a mom, a dad, a son, a daughter, way back in them days, and they all look just meaner than teetotal hell. It's like that's the real picture of them. There's nothing fake about it. That's like, hurry up and get this over with. Got stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, probably the shock to it all. Getting a picture made is like, us going and getting a chance to get on the spaceship and fly to the moon tomorrow. Like, wow, this is real,
Good night, Elmer.
Good night, Elmer. Or Elmore. Or Elmore Canoe Bushcraft. He has another cool drawing on his thing. I seen it today.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's true too. It took a long time to take the photos back then.
Yeah, you're, I guess if you was smiling, you wouldn't be smiling by the time it finally flashed.
No selfies. Hey, I'm out here in the cornfield. That's when you think about it. Just even with us back in the day when we were kids and stuff, Polaroids. You sit there and you'd take that picture and you'd have to shake it for 10 minutes to get a picture.
That was like the fastest camera around, though, the Polaroids, especially when they come out with the kind where you snap it and it just shoot right out the bottom and you get it. That was kind of magical, though, when it come out, you got that white little thing and you keep shaking and you watch it come into the life.
or you got too much light in it and you had half a face here and then a white streak when it finished out.
Yeah.
I agree with Born on the Mountain, Raised in a Cave. That's, I mean, venison and, you know, meats was their biggest. I mean, that's what you had most of the time. I mean, because the rest of it was seasonal. Ah, true. Tim said it. Your teeth wasn't something you'd want to
Yeah,
show off.
yeah. Did y'all have TV too, Mike?
I did. I got it in 1997 when I bought one. Actually, I remember the day we got cable TV. It didn't come that day. They told us that we were getting cable, and I was like, yes. I run home from school thinking it's going to be on, and still 3, 9, and 12. Next day, no cable. I done gave up on it. One day I came home. My mom was in there watching something. I said, new TV show? She goes, oh no, look, we got cartoons too. You remember the, you turn
Yeah,
the dial
that's what we
around.
had too. Yeah.
And then
I
you
still
got high
almost
tech.
remember the channels too. I know one of them was like 42 on
We
the
had,
little dial.
what was that? What is it?
42 or 45.
UHF and VHF. You could
Yeah.
go to like the Golden Gallon or the convenience store and get the little UHF band that would go on the back of the TV, and you'd unscrew the screws and then you stick it back on there. Or you're sitting out there
Yeah.
doing this with a pole, and then you'd run
Yeah.
back in the house. Or you'd hear your dad out there. No, go back. No,
Yeah.
go back the other way. No, keep turning it.
Born on a mountain, raised in a cave just made a good point too. He says, yeah, well, you didn't have the sugar. Sugar was a luxury and considered fortunate.
Very.
That's a good point there too. So your teeth wouldn't rot like they do today.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is 11:08, and this fat guy's got to get up and head to work in the morning. But hope I didn't bore anybody too much, and I hope some of y'all got something other out of it. And it's just something I was fascinated with, and I kind of thought, Alan and I, we've talked about it, and there's only so much you can talk about with bushcraft survival and prepping until you have to venture off into something else. It's related to it, but in a different angle, I guess, but you see that, there's more than just the things that are happening today or the books that we read. It's kind of like, eventually I plan to get up to the Nesmic era. And I kind of read a few things on that. And he was considered more of a outdoorsman camper, journalist sort of sense. There was several other people that was like him that had done those styles were, I guess closer to the early 1900s, the late 1800s, early 19, when things had been more, I guess, civilized, and we had made our way across and started establishing pathways.
Yes, MT Woods Runner. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That was it.
Oh. Yeah, it's every Wednesday night now, and unless Mike's schedule changes again, which I'm sure it probably will one day, but
I'm sure it will.
For right now, it's Wednesdays at 10.
But
and it'll be that way until further notice.
But that's everything that I've got. So
yeah, and good night, everybody. Thank everybody for showing up. We enjoy all the talk. We learn from y'all just as well.
Can food hunt food? Can food hunt food? Wear a belt. Go light with skills. Everybody have a good one, and I'll catch y'all on Alan's channel next week on Wednesday night. So thanks for stopping in.